Today's video was meant to be just a gutter refurbishment video, but in the course of doing it I chanced upon something that was so significant I decided it merited its own video, as it doesn't just apply to gutters but any metalwork that's riddled with rust. So in today's video I'm going to show you how to comprehensively convert or neutralize rust in preparation for painting. Let me tell you quickly how I got to this point of needing a rust converter. We moved into this cottage back in 2010 and the gutters were for a long time on my list of things that needed sorting out. Looking at the old gutters, you'd be forgiven for thinking they were long past the point of refurbishment, more a case of ripping them out and replacing, and a lot of you pointed this out when the gutters occasionally feature on my videos. But if you look at the state of the gutters that I repainted 3 years ago before I started, and then look at how good they're still looking 3 years later, you'll start to see why it really was worth all that time and effort. And I challenge you to show me a plastic gutter system that would last the 50 to 60 years that these have in this sort of condition. Now I'll go into more details on the stripping down, painting and reassembly in next week's video. But suffice to say, I was intending to strip all the paint off these gutters using some pretty simple tools and prime them with the brilliant Bonder rust primer that I discovered 3 years ago. It's a resin-based zinc anti-rust coating which, when combined with this Johnston Storm Shield flexible gloss, has produced a finish which 3 years later is still looking fantastic with no signs of the rust reappearing. The gutters were coated in a badly peeling top coat and a thick bitumen sublayer which itself is responsible for the cast iron having survived so well all these years. But in stripping everything down to a near pristine bare metal surface, I had created a problem. So I finished stripping off the gutters one evening, and by the next morning they'd already started to rust over. And whilst desperate to give them a prime with the Bonder rust primer, I couldn't because the weather had turned and it was starting to rain. And with the rust forming and the rain preventing me from doing any priming for a few days, I started wondering about that rust. I don't know about you, but on a job like this, even if you're not worried about damp or impending rain, and even if you've got a fantastic product like Bonder rust primer, I do always worry about whether I'm removing the rust comprehensively enough before painting. In the past I've occasionally used this Rustin's rust remover, but it's a small pot and contains caustic ingredients, phosphoric acid to be precise, that then have to be rinsed off before priming. It was at this point I chanced upon a website called Neutrarust. They also, like Rustin's, do a rust remover in liquid and, for trickier vertical surfaces, gel format, but theirs comes in larger, more practical quantities and is non-toxic. However, what really interested me was their 661 rust converter. For one, it needs rust to work, which I now had in abundance, thinly covering the surface of the gutters and downpipes. Secondly, it can be painted onto damp surfaces, and whilst I wanted to avoid this, with the rain coming down, it was something that might come in handy. So what this converter does is it neutralizes the corrosion, converting the rusted surface into a black, complex organic iron compound with a deoxygenating agent, and this can take just 30 minutes in normal conditions. This is quite an important point because rust removers can typically dissolve away so much of the surface that you're trying to repaint, you end up with holes or a lot less than what you were hoping for, whereas a rust converter, by converting the existing rust into an organic compound, leaves you with a lot more of the structure of the thing that you're trying to protect. It's water-based, which helps with the cleaning of the paintbrushes, although anyone who's watched my recent decking video will know I'm a bit skeptical of water-based products for outdoor use. But given it's water-based, what happens to it is all the more remarkable. It dries to form a hard black, non-tacky, water-insoluble, hydrophobic film. Great because, as it happened, after painting it on, I was off on holiday for a week before I was able to get any primer on. And when I got back, it looked exactly the same as it had before I left. And finally, the resulting black chemical compound layer is completely neutral, meaning it can be used as a primer without further treatment, and can also be overpainted with oil-based paints, two-part lacquers or bitumastic, and tar-based finishes. You don't even need to prime it, which is handy when the elements are against you, and in fact on oil rigs I'm informed that what they do is they prime it with this stuff and then go straight on with oil-based top coat. And where can you use it? Well, the MOD and the US Air Force, Navy, military use it. If it's good enough for them, I thought it had to be a good shout for my gutters. Plus, I've got an old Mark IV Golf which needs urgent treatment on the rear wings. If the rust on those gets much worse, the car will be a write-off. So in a minute, I'm going to show you how I got on with that as well. In short, if it's a rusted ferrous metal surface, then this stuff will work on it. So I ended up buying this 5-litre tub, and when I got chatting to Alan, who runs the business, about the video I had planned, he also sent me this 1-litre container. I don't know what I was doing buying that 5-litre tub, because so far I've used up on the gutters that you'll see in today's video about that much. And I should stress at this point that I bought the product featured in today's video, and Neutrarust haven't paid me anything to mention them in the video. So let me show you how I got on. I'll go into a bit more detail in the next video, but suffice to say I removed the old flaky paint and the thick bitumen sublayer with my Hamilton Prestige heavy duty paint scraper. It'd be a great scraper this if I hadn't had to modify it by strengthening the blade plate, but I'll talk about that in the next video. I then removed any high spots of rust and some of that bitumen I couldn't quite get off with the paint scraper with the wire brush on my grinder. You basically want to remove anything which is likely to have a void behind it, so paint that's raised from the surface or rust that the Neutrarust 661 isn't going to be able to get behind. But you want to leave some rust on the surface because that's what the Neutrarust reacts with to do its work. You're also advised to remove grease and chemicals with a detergent water wash and then rinse afterwards. 3 years ago on those other gutters I used Zinsser's degreaser and cleaner to quite good effect, but you do have to rinse that off afterwards as well. So this time I thought I'd experiment with multi-solve spray, which I used extensively to remove silicone and then to degrease the surface before re-siliconing. Multi-solve is a degreaser that evaporates after use, so having sprayed it on the gutters and given it a quick wipe, I was ready to go. Being water-based, the application of the Neutrarust 661 is so simple. I applied it using a brush, although you can roller it on or use an airless sprayer, and this simplicity of application was particularly useful on the rise and fall brackets for the gutters. During application it changes colour from off-white to blue to black, and at the blue stage you're advised to gently keep brushing for a couple of minutes and then allow it to dry for the chemical reaction and conversion of the rust surface to take place. Depending on the application you might need 2 or 3 coats. The gutters themselves were fine after 1 coat, whereas this downpipe still had some rust residue showing through, but a second coat left it as a pristine dark black surface. And then there was my car. I was hoping to get this into the local garage to sort out the corroded back wings before the winter and all that destructive salt on the roads. But the guy who's slowly restoring it with me is too busy right now, so I'm keen to stop corrosion in its tracks so I can keep driving it. So I stripped off the paint where I could see that the rust was forming behind, took the wire brush to the rust to remove any loose bits, gave it a good wipe with a wet cloth, and then painted on 2 coats of Neutrarust. The result is incredibly satisfying, with all the rust completely neutralised and a waterproof surface ready for priming. So that's pretty much it for today. In case you were wondering why I did actually prime those downpipes with the Bondo Rust Primer after using the Neutrarust, well, that's a very good question. The answer is I didn't need to, and I could have saved myself a lot of time and effort if I'd gone straight to the top coat. And on the top coat again, in case you're wondering, yes, I used this Storm Shield flexible gloss. There are lots of other more bespoke glosses for metal surfaces available out there. I just used this because it was the one that they could mix at Johnston's to the paint colour that I was after. Before I finish, just a quick word about my Discord chat forum. For £5 a month, you can tap into our incredibly friendly forum featuring a number of passionate DIYers as well as professional painters, decorators, electricians and carpenters. And of course, me. Oh, and we also have monthly free giveaways. I'll post a link in the description to where you can sign up, or if you'd prefer, to simply buy me a cup of coffee. It's more of a financial struggle than you would think running a full-time DIY YouTube channel, and so if you find my videos useful, this is just one wonderful way that you can help me out while solving out a load of your DIY conundrums. So I'm going to now try and use this remaining window of decent weather we've got to paint the outside of this house. So in the next couple of weeks, hopefully there'll be a video on that and the gutter video. If you've liked today's video, it'd be great if you could give it a thumbs up below. Details of all the tools and the products that I've referred to today will be in the description below the video, which, don't forget, you can access on your smartphone by clicking on the little arrow and on your PC by clicking on the Show More button. And finally, as I always say, if you're new to my channel, it would literally mean so much to me if you could subscribe, and you can do that by clicking on the link here. But don't forget to click the bell notification icon so you get notified of all my future uploads. Thanks for watching and see you soon.